Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. Meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. It's wonderful to be with you this morning, and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. And, of course, on X at Santita J, or the Santita Jackson Show. And I'm on Blue Sky, everybody. I can't believe it. I did it all by myself. I'm going to change the picture soon. And of course, that's at santitajackson.bsky.social. It's a joy to be with you in this holy season. As we wrap up the year, we're going to be looking at different issues that have really jumped off the radar and really jumped up for you. And so we're going to be talking about a whole lot over the next few days. And I want you to stay with me. Hey, Robert, shalom, Robert, and Donna, and so many people. Please like and share, like and share, like and share. I know I'm coming to you at a different time today, but here it goes. We're trying to get a lot of things done before the year is out. The young lady you see with me is someone for whom I have tremendous respect. I have enjoyed her podcast enormously. Sabby Sabs. I don't have my cup, but I'm sipping my tea. I love it. I love it. And of course, the co-host of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, Sabrina Salvati. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
No, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. I always have a lot of respect for people who seek and project truth. Really, and you do it with courage, and I appreciate that. And we're doing this. I have several questions for you today, a lot of them, and we'll pack as many as we can in. It's very interesting. Now, more and more people are moving away from so-called legacy media, what we on this show call corporate media, and they're moving toward you. They're moving toward MySpace. They're moving toward people who are independent. I know I've been put off of enough terrestrial radio stations to understand what being independent, well, what it costs. But that's my family legacy, and I'm okay with that because I do enough things to just keep it moving. I haven't missed a meal, and if you do, well, that's okay. That having been said, like, for example, CNN in 2020 had 13.3 million people viewing the night of the election. They had just more than 800,000 this time. And my pivot is no longer, this is not the CNN, for example, not to pick on them, but it's not the CNN envisioned by Ted Turner. Ted Turner had the Goodwill Games. He talked to everybody. Reverend Jackson, my father had a show on CNN. He was really reaching out. And you heard views all across the spectrum. You don't hear that anymore. And now we are in the shadow of this $15 million settlement from ABC. They had to pay Donald Trump because they kept saying that he was civilly liable for rape, which was not true. See, the thing is, Sabrina, whether I agree with your politics or not, I'm not going to mislead people about you. I'm going to state the facts because I have had people I love who've been mischaracterized and they've been lied on. And beyond that, I just don't think it's the right thing to do. What do you think is moving people away from so-called legacy media into your space? Because I love your headlines. I love your story selection. And, there's so many that you could choose from. But I think that you've been very, very, obviously you've been very deliberate. But I appreciate the stories you've chosen and your take on them. Why are people moving toward you and toward Joe Rogan? Yes, because it's just a big basket, right? And Nico House, my duopoly destroyer, and on and on. Why do you think people are moving? And Roland Martin, I can't, people are moving. People are moving. Why do you think that's happening?
I think Americans are looking for the truth, and I think they feel like they're not getting that truth from corporate media. And I started to see a little bit of this trend starting in 2016. It was after Hillary Clinton lost the presidential election. I think at that point, more people were starting to feel like, was the media honest with us about Hillary's chances for winning? And Is there someone else out there that maybe could have predicted this the correct way? Is there something that I overlooked? A corporate media told me that she had this in the bag. She was way ahead of Donald Trump. There was no way that he was going to become president of the United States. Did I miss something here? And to that, I would tell the American people, you didn't miss anything. You were misled. And I think that people saw that again this time around with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. If you were watching corporate media, particularly left leaning corporate media, they would have you believe that Kamala Harris had this election in the bag. I remember watching some people saying, oh, there's even a play for Texas, which I think if you spoke to anyone that lived in Texas, they would have told you that was not the case at all. With this particular election, I think that the American people feel even more misled. Mm-hmm. Kamala Harris's staff members now coming forward and saying that the polls that they saw internally never had her ahead of Donald Trump. It's all of this information that's coming out now that the people feel like we were purposefully misled about Kamala Harris's chances. And I think it's pushed some of them towards like, let's see what else is out there. Did anybody else get this right? And I was one of the people that got it right. I predicted that Donald Trump would win every swing state. So did one of my comrades over at RBN because of the things that we heard from people on the ground. And I think this is where CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, they are negligent when it comes to the on the ground reporting game. They pick these focus groups that are carefully selected, by the way, to give you what they want you to hear. But they don't actually just go out and do those man on the street videos that a lot of us were used to seeing, like growing up, just to ask random people, how are you feeling? And not edit it in such a way to make it fit the narrative that they're trying to portray. So some of us in independent media, we did that. We went on the ground just to ask people, like, how are you feeling about this? We had multiple panels to ask people how they felt about this election. And what I was hearing from people on the ground was never the same information that I heard on corporate media. And that's what really gave me pause. The fact that they really convinced people that Kamala Harris, who could barely get a delegate when she ran in 2020, was going to just sweep away with this election. It was laughable to me. And it was disheartening, I think, for a lot of people who did support Kamala Harris.
Well, because it was a lie. I mean, I think the quiet part is being said out loud now. I mean, the fact is, they have always, their job is to shape the narrative. You know, I remember going to the 1992 convention, Democratic convention, and we were backstage. Reverend Jackson, my father, was about to speak, and Senator Bill Bradley from New Jersey walked up to him, and he said, Jesse, I'm sorry, they go back years. And my father said, you know, sorry about what? What happened? He said, you haven't seen? No. He said, oh my goodness, the New York Times wrote that your speech was poorly received. He had not given it yet. We were on our way, and not to mention the fact that he was scheduled to speak at said time, and wink, nod. It turns out they were going to call him 30 minutes early to fight through New York traffic to get. Come on, girl, I got stories for you. I mean, and so, yeah, I mean, it's really, look, and on this platform, and that's what I talk about, because I want people to understand how things really work, because that is how being misled. No, I mean, sometimes we want to believe the lie, the untruth. I mean, if you talk to people on the ground, you can feel the buzz in the streets when someone has got this in the bag. You felt it. And I wasn't even living in Chicago at the time. I was in school when Harold Washington won. He caught the media in Chicago and around the country completely by surprise. But if you were on the ground and you saw the voter registration, and if you went to the South and West sides where Black people are, and you saw the signs and the buttons, and you felt the heat, you knew he was going to win. And these people were called flat-footed. And I think that happened this time. And I mean, and what about these stories? I mean, because it seems to me that they've been suppressing a lot of stories about all the campaigns, quite frankly, but particularly the Democrats have been doing that. I mean, look, they just had a mess. You cancel the primary. You're running for democracy. Really? You threw out 14 million votes. Really? Biden was supposed to be a transitional president 4 years. Really? Norman Solomon and Jeff Cohen are called blasphemers, traitors to the party or to progressivism. They said, no, you need to get out, and you need to have done it 2 years ago. And the thing is, whether you are a Democrat, Republican, or independent, I believe in having the process because I'm an independent Democrat. I have to be registered because I have a brother in Congress. I want to vote for him. I'm going to be straight up with you about that, but I'm really an independent, and my mother is done with everything. It's just, I mean, well, and I am too, but yeah, I have a few more years. My mother's got 20 years on me almost. So I'm like, well, no, I'm going to try and vote for my brother, but I'm sick of it all because now you hear the anger. I watch C-SPAN in the morning. I see the comments on your show, and I see people. I don't see people losing hope, but I see them angry. Because even when we're looking at Luigi Mangiani, or Mangiano, is it Mangiani? Uh,
Mangione.
Mangione. My goodness, I can't believe I'm getting that wrong. But when I look at this young man, and they continue to try and craft the narrative that he's just some cold-blooded murderer. I don't sign on to killing people. That having been said, read the room. People are dying because these insurance companies, and I want you to read on it, that they don't insure, they don't assure you of good health. They just they collect your money, they invest it, and they make their money from denying you coverage. I mean, Mr. Thompson's base salary was $1 million. Where did the other 9 million come from? From us being denied. How do you read this story? Because the the corporate media continue to push this, and I think that they're pushing people away. I'm not mad about that, but you tell me what's your read?
It's definitely not helping their ratings right now. They're not reading the room. Healthcare for me is very personal. It's one of the reasons why I did support Bernie Sanders because he was running on Medicare for all. There are many of us that have had to deal with denied claims, whether it's ourselves personally or family members or friends that have gone through that process. But my first job out of undergrad was working in the billings department at a healthcare facility. And it was my job to contact insurance companies and to get them to pay these claims. So I remember very much that United Healthcare was horrible. It was one of the worst ones when it came to paying what they were supposed to pay. They heavily denied. And then you have to go back to the patients and tell them that the insurance company did not pay, so they need to pay. And it was a very frustrating position to be in because I knew the insurance companies were wrong. Like what they were doing to these patients was incorrect. And it's not just United Healthcare at the end of the day, but they are one of the worst ones. So I have experiences with that. I have experience with medical debt. I had medical debt for 3 years to pay it off. So very much familiar. And I feel like corporate media is really getting this wrong. One of the reasons why someone like Bernie Sanders was incredibly popular was the fact that he was running on Medicare for all. And this was something, an issue that affects people regardless of political ideology. A lot of people have had that experience through the healthcare system, and they said something has to change. Why is it that you and I can go to the UK or we can go to Denmark and everybody in those countries has health insurance? Why do we not have it? And we're the wealthiest country in the world. And I think that's something that I wish Bernie Sanders would have led with. Mm-hmm. Why do we not have it? It's not just because of the for-profit health insurance companies. It's also because the reason why we do not have universal health care in this particular country is because they didn't want Black people to have health insurance. And I wish Bernie Sanders would have led with that. I wish, more of the progressive candidates that ran also would have led with that, because that tells you they did not want Black people to live on or to live long and to build generations in this country. It is very oppressive when you think about that. So I think that unfortunately, to go along with that, that mentality also affected poor white people. And what I try to get across to people on my show is that oftentimes some of the laws that have been implemented in this country to affect the Black community also end up affecting low income white people. So at the end of the day, when you put race and class together, you will see they really don't care about the people at the bottom, and they have no problem with you being disposed. So I think corporate media doesn't get it because a lot of the pundits on these particular networks, they're rich. Joe and Mika have a penthouse apartment in New York City. Like they're not talking about the grocery store prices because they probably don't even have to think about how much it costs when they go, or if they do the grocery shopping and someone else does it for them. They don't have to think about these things. The majority of Americans are on a budget and they have to think about these things. But the fact that for years, these health insurance companies have continued to deny claims and have killed thousands of people. And by the way, it's not just people who are poor. There are people who are middle-class Americans that have gone into bankruptcy because they had to go through cancer treatments and the insurance wouldn't pay it. This has been going on for years. And I really encourage people to take a deep look into this. Watch Michael Moore's documentary, Sicko. So you can see how these families have been turned away, whether it's Flint, Michigan, and it's not just Flint, Michigan that has dirty water, by the way.
I'm in Chicago. I mean,
exactly.
I mean, because Sabrina, that's what we're missing. I mean, Lonnie Guinier, I've heard her give a speech at the Rainbow Push Convention. Oh my goodness! Just after she had come through that madness of the mashup on her confirmation during the Clinton years, and she said, we have to remember that Blacks are the canaries in the mine. And many of us don't realize that racism is a form of classism, not the opposite. And what hits Black people first hits white people eventually. You drop drugs in the Black community in the 60s and the 70s and 80s, well, then they're going to drop fentanyl on you eventually, and they did do that, right? They got to numb you out too, because if you are numbed out, you're not going to fight back. So I mean, where is this? Do you think that we have reached a pivot point on the discussion on national health care, on universal single payer? Because I still see, well, you know what? I think that the corporate media, on one level, they have read the room, but they continue to try to reshape the narrative. And I think this horse is at the barn. Or what do you think?
I think that the American people are smarter than corporate media realizes. I even saw there was a video Ben Shapiro made about this issue, and his audience turned against him in the comments. It's just, this is not a left-right issue. Healthcare is not a left-right issue. This is an everyone issue. And I think the media, for years, they've tried to find a way to make this a left-right issue. Oh, those crazy Bernie supporters want to give everybody health care, et cetera. They didn't read the room back then. There's a reason why Bernie Sanders was doing so well among registered independents. So I think that they have been successful over the years with dividing us over left versus right on some issues, but not the healthcare issue. And this one is not this. You can't look at this and say it's a social issue or only the left cares about that. You can't, because everybody has been affected by it, especially if you had insurance and you had claims denied, or if you don't have health insurance. So they can't, that type of division over this issue is not going to work. A couple of years ago, we had a march in this country in over 50 cities for Medicare for all. We reached out to multiple politicians about the march. Even some of the progressive ones, or quote unquote progressive ones, not only didn't want to promote it, didn't want to come to it. Cori Bush was the only one. She was the only one that showed up. AOC was out there trying to help Nina Turner get elected on the same day. These are the people that ran on this particular issue. So there was a big outcry from the people that we need healthcare for everyone in this country. And a lot of the politicians decided to overlook it or to ignore it. So who's funding them? And I think that's what you have to look at. Who's funding them? Or is it that they're afraid of Democrat leadership? And who's funding Democrat leadership? So I tell people, if you follow the money, you'll be able to get the answer to some of these questions. But the fact that everyone in this country doesn't have health insurance, it's disgusting in 2024.
Or even that assurance that when you go when you go to get treated, you just get treated. You know, I was in France not too long ago, and I needed to get some medicine. They just, my hotel said, okay, no, just go down here, or we'll have them come here, Miss Jackson. Just okay. And it was $5, something that my insurance would bill. Well, I mean, they told me, if you didn't have insurance, this would cost you $700. I'm like, wait, what are we doing here? And it is this driving bankruptcies in this country. And I just see the corporate media continuing to try and move this thing. And I said, you all are going to kill yourselves. Where do you think MSNBC is going to go?
That's a good question.
I mean, will Elon Musk buy it, or that would be the biggest joke of all. But I mean, what do you think is going to happen there? I mean, because I wasn't surprised that Mika and Joe went to Mar-a-Lago. Number one, they promoted him in the first place. Look, let me keep it a buck with you, as they say. My mother always told me, look, when white folks fight, you need to duck. Get out of that. Get out of that. She said, let them fight, let them hug it out, because that's what they're going to do. Because white people don't do parties, they do power, period. Mika's brother's a big Republican. Her father was a trilateralist. This is Bilderberg. This is CFR. That's what this is. These folks run the room. I mean, they run it. So what do you think is going to happen with this particular entity? I mean, because they look like they are running scared over there.
It will probably be sold off. I did see that Comcast is already willing to kind of tossed it aside. It will probably be sold off. It's crazy that, unfortunately, a lot of people that were watching MSNBC have moved over to Fox News. I mean, they're not any better. They have a bias as well. And I think people are going to see that more and more as we get into 2025. But they'll probably sell it off. Someone will probably pick it up. I don't know if Elon Musk was serious or not, but I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that.
I mean, just for the heck of it. And so I'm just wondering where that's going to go and where the people who are on the air there will go. Because, I mean, and what do you make of, well, we see what's happened with the Kamala Harris campaign. Heard a lot of whispers through Washington, and, I always tried to figure out how this was going to work. I said, if she wants to stay in the game, listen to Willie Brown, who made you. Stay in the Senate, because this is not the errand that you want to be on. That was just my thought. I'm like, and if someone who is as seasoned as Willie Brown tells you, don't do this, don't do it. Because I'm just sorry. It just felt strange to me. And then she ran into essentially Biden's campaign, and they gave her horrible advice. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that Kamala Harris should have never ran for president in the first place. Well, it goes back to 2020.
Everybody else did too.
Yeah. Now I hear she's possibly considering running for governor of California. I'm not sure how that will work there, considering there are a number of Black families in particular that are not happy with Kamala Harris because of her policies and her record there in California as AG. So I don't think that I don't think that's the best idea for her. But it's not like she would listen to me. I think that Kamala Harris, they tried to make her like the female Barack Obama. And I didn't catch it with Barack Obama first time around. I was very excited about him, and I really believed him when he said, we're going to get hope and change, and it's time for a change. I fell for all of that, and I ate it up. But then, the longer Barack Obama was in office, I started to see he's no different than the other politicians that came before him. What happened to codifying Roe v. Wade into law? What happened to all these things that you ran on? All of a sudden, it's no, we're not going to do that at this point in time. So Kamala is supposed to be the female version of Barack Obama. And I think the Democratic Party assumed that because Black women heavily come out and support the Democrat presidential candidate, that this would be the Black woman's candidate for the Dems. And I think what they miscalculated was, number one, the economy was the number one issue that I heard from most voters that I spoke to. It was not Roe v. Wade, believe it or not. The number one issue was the economy. There were a number of Black voters that were upset about immigration.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I heard Black voters tell me immigration was a top 3 issue.
I'm in Chicago. So and I go to the grocery store. So, because that's a conversation. You meet people in the grocery store now, and everybody is complaining, whether it's an affluent neighborhood or where Black people live, and everybody's saying this is ridiculous.
And
I don't know how that was missed. And all you have to do is turn on the news. Brandon Johnson, who came in here, I mean, people were excited about him. The Black community are furious with him. And I will fully disclose, he's a personal friend and I love him to pieces. But I told him, you got to get ahead of this thing. And they haven't done it. And now they're talking about having Rahm Emanuel run for mayor, Sabrina. Can I move up to Boston with you? Maybe. I don't help me with that. I'm sorry. I mean, I wasn't trying to cut you off, but I'm in agreement with you. I'm like, well, what are we doing here? This is crazy. I mean,
yeah,
no, please continue. Please.
I think the Democratic Party, they want to give the Black community a Black face, but they don't want to actually do anything for the Black community. And a lot of us learned that through Obama.
Repeat that one more time. Say it again.
The Democratic Party, they want to give the Black community a Black face, but they don't want to actually do anything for the Black community.
Thank you. I grew up in Chicago under the Democrats, so, I totally get it. And a little secret, they don't let you in the Oval Office unless, you sign up to play the game. It's just people keep saying, Trump is going to be a dictator. I'm like, sweetie, the office is not constructed that way. I mean, he is answerable to other powers. That's why Elon Musk, the quiet part is being said out loud. I'm talking to Sabrina Salvati, the Savvy Sabs podcast. You've got to see the Revolutionary Blackout Network. I love them too. And so you've got to give them your support because they give you really an unfiltered view of the news. All of the things that we talk about, the things when you hear her talk, you say, well, I'm not crazy. This is what I thought. And she backs it up with facts. Thank you very much. You're entitled to your own opinion, but not your separate set of facts. And so please give Savvy Sabs your support. Where do you see, the progressive movement going? Because now we've got Jim Zogby. I said, Jim Zogby, you'll keep me in the party, because when they put Rahm Emanuel out there, I said, I can't be in a party where he's the chair. I can't do that. I can't. I cannot. I can't. But I think one of the blind spots of the progressive movement has always been racism. Not race, but racism, right? The Jackson campaign, and I'm older than you, so, and I say that not to condescend, but to say, this is what we experienced, because those of us who were part of that campaign, it was the first time we voted, or we were about to vote. And so you really got a chance to see it. And the day that Reverend announced that he was running, he said, I'm a Black man, and this is an American campaign, but it's from the Black perspective. It's from the manger up, not from the mansion down. He's Southern, so there you go. And he said, and that was something that you did not get. And I love Bernie Sanders, who came out of our campaign, but he missed that part. And as he continued to miss that part, I said, you're missing. When you miss us, And there was so much excitement about him, period, anyway. Um, that to me was like the flaw. And then you had a lot of people, several of whom who were critical to the Jackson campaign, who now passed on over the past 2 or 3 years, who could have been in there helping him with that. But progressives always, they miss that, Sabrina. And so I think they miss a grand opportunity with Black people. And plus, they push on some issues that, Black people are socially conservative. So some things I'm like, don't don't do that here. I'm not biased against anyone, but there's some things that ain't gonna work well here. Just shut up. Where we are, just pick one or two of these issues where we're gonna sign on with you, and you can run on down the street. But there's some things that will not work well with us. Where do you see the progressive movement going? You've got, in a few more months, Democrats are going to elect new leadership. Where do you see them going? Where do you see Jill Stein going? I mean.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Jill Stein, because this is the message I really want to get across to a lot of people. And that is that the progressive movement is at the Green Party. The progressive movement is at Dr. Cornel West's new party, Justice for All. Bernie Sanders knows this too. That's why he is ranting. He's ranting right now and said it was a horrible campaign. He's being very vocal, and he's very angry about how the way that Kamala Harris lost. Not just that she lost, but the way she lost.
What do you mean by that? Explain that.
Trump got the popular vote. So he's very upset about that. He knows that progressives can't make headway in the Democratic Party. And I said this a while back, that all of those people, the squad members, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, look at the way Rashida Tlaib is treated in the Democratic Party when she stands up for her people, right? AOC, all of those people should have been in a separate party, because the Democrat leadership is not going to allow them to make any headway. That's why Corey and Jamal are gone. Just like that, they so-called pushed too heavily for Gaza for the Democratic Party. So AIPAC had to come and get them out. This is how this works. So I think that the Green Party's platform and Cornel West Justice for All platform, it goes a step further than the progressive platform through the Democratic Party, because it includes reparations. And that is something that Bernie Sanders did not have a part of his platform, although Nina Turner advised him to have it. So he just didn't want to hear it, It's interesting. A lot of people are for reparations for other groups, but the moment that you mention reparations for American descendants of slavery, they're against it. So pay attention to that. And I think that that's what people need to do. I get it. I understand that some people are very concerned about where the right wants to go on certain issues. I get all that. But get this presidential election, for some people, they said this would be their chance to vote against the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Okay, how come all of the female voters, how come more female voters didn't come out to vote against that? Why is it that Kamala Harris couldn't win on that simple issue alone? That's because it's not a top issue for most voters. So the Democratic Party, they don't even know what we want. Like, they're just going around and they're assuming that, just run on reproductive freedom, and not thinking about the fact that even some women that are Democrats don't really agree too well with Roe v. Wade. So there's that. I think that that's what people have to do. Jill Stein and Shama Sawant have announced that they are collaborating yet again after this in February of 2025. They are starting a movement against the billionaire class. And I think this is a great idea, where they're combining labor also with social justice and, of course, political education. And I think that's the way to go. Shama Sawant, who I heavily recommend, because she has won on the ground. Before she was city councilor at Seattle, she won on the ground first. So she is someone that comes from activism and organizing, didn't want it to be all about her. After she decided not to run again for a Seattle city councilor, she started an organization called Workers Strike Back, because she knows at the end of the day, We have to fight for the workers. This country doesn't even want to increase the minimum wage. Why is the federal minimum wage still $7.25 an hour? And there are a number of states in this country where that is still their minimum wage, like Pennsylvania. So a swing state. So you can't ignore the economic concerns of the people. At the same time, you have to really listen to and be willing to fight for real liberation and determination for Black people in this country. And I know these things happened a long time ago. I know slavery, Jim Crow, redlining. Redlining still in a way takes place. We still have segregation in this country. Black people don't have generational wealth because of the policies that were implemented against us because of slavery.
By 2050, we're supposed to have a wealth of zero, the Black family. And they came out with a study just a couple of years ago. Chicago's the capital of redlining because it's the most segregated city in the country. This is very real. But I think a piece that, and I just had Cornel West, Dr. West, on my show last week. He's a very dear, dear friend of many, many, many years. And I said, one of the things that many people, and I was talking to Dr. Aubrey Hendricks, a brilliant theologian, I said, the piece that people miss about, and the Jackson campaigns were iconic. And there were some things I wish they had done moving forward. And if my father had listened to my mom, he would have done it. Really, because my mother is extremely progressive, but she is from people who, my mother got on a boat with her mother, who was a migrant worker back in the 30s and 40s because she was poor, and she's from South Florida. So first time I went to Havana, she could tell me how to get around Havana because she would go there and chop sugar cane and pick beans. She said, no, when you go down this street, turn here, turn there, da, 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 da. That's a shortcut to Hotel Havana. Blah, blah, blah. Wow. I couldn't believe it. And what you have to organize all the time, Sabrina. You never are out of season I told Nina Turner this. I said, hon, you can't miss a high school graduation. And not just a high school graduation. You have to talk to these kids all the time. Have rallies where you are inspiring people, getting them involved in the voting process, and make it nonpartisan. Because the point is to get people to be involved in the process. For me, because it's a uni party, so just let that go. Get people registered and let them make up their own minds, okay? Because I know it's, the Democrats and the Republicans are functions of the oligarchy. They have different cultural appeals. That's it. Different messages. That's all they do. But I know that I learned that in order to get into the process, Reverend had to do what he had to do because we were not even in the kitchen, let alone on the menu, and certainly didn't have a seat at the table. We couldn't do business with either party. That's why Armstrong Williams was head of Young Black Republicans for Jesse Jackson, because it opened up the process for everybody. Now we can have another discussion. But y'all were not even here. It was no discussion. And I take this is my rant for the moment. I don't want to hear about Reverend no Jesse Jackson, no Obama. Our point was not just to get a black face in a high place. No, it was never that. We're progressives. Let's be very clear on that. And we were running against a man who opened his campaign. One of his opening events was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where they killed Goodman, Schorner, and Cheney. Do you know how frightening that was in 1980? I can tell you it frightened us to death. I'm not afraid of anybody. But this was not 20 years after Dr. King had been killed. And you had someone who went after Dr. King in the 60s, someone who came after the Black Panthers, someone who was to the right of Attila the Hun, who you saw was about to become president. And you said, oh my gosh, where's America going? And this is like 2-3 years after Baki. So they're coming after everything that we fought for. And no one would stand up to Reagan. Nobody had the nerve. Reagan was a juggernaut, Sabrina. Nobody would stand up to him. So then you wanted to, because Bernie was unaffiliated. He was sick of both parties. We said, well, look, we got a lane, and we had to run against the Democratic Party. They didn't want Reverend. Girl, we got to San Francisco at the Democratic convention. We had, you have a home hotel, and they knew we were coming in on that Saturday. Our rooms were not even clean. Put your eyebrows down. And my mother, being the real one, went all the way off in the lobby. She said, I've been an N-word all year long. Y'all ain't gonna do this to us. I'm done. So we got to take a lot of hits in order for us to get here and have this conversation. Because I think it's important for us to understand the context. I had to tell Nina. I said, Nina, you're not going the doxing. I was cursed out in my Harvard interview. I was a merit scholar because we stood up for the Palestinians. This was 1981. I said, this ain't nothing new. I said, now the quiet part's being said out loud. Now what are we gonna do about it? What they did to Bernie, they did to Reverend. Burying him. Yeah. People made phone calls. The thing is, the difference between Reverend and Bernie was that Reverend was such a brilliant organizer, and we had more than 70 affiliate offices of push. At the time, we had our people on the ground who you couldn't even measure. And that is what I want the progressives to do. Jill Stein, everybody. Nina, I want India up in Buffalo. I said, y'all got to organize all the time. You can't stop. You got to register people all the time. You got to keep your people revved up all the time. If you do not, that's how, you got to go to the jails. Who has been convicted? If you haven't been convicted, you can get registered to vote right now. Come on, let's do this. We have to do that kind of organizing. Otherwise, we're always going to be behind the 8 ball. Pardon my rant, but I just, I would be wrong if I didn't impart that to you, because I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't just pop up. And please don't give me another first. I get it. But that was never our point. Never. We'll never abandon the Palestinians. Israeli security, Palestinian justice. I get it. We'd never do that. Wait a minute. Where's Haiti? Hello? Y'all ain't talking about that? And Reverend was not going to be president because he's not going to bomb and kill anybody. So that part, I knew that. And when you get up in there, when you get real close to it, you're like, oh, so this is what this is about. Well, you know what? As he said to my mother, look, we have made our point. We fought for the poor. Now people talk about the Palestinians because there was a no-talk policy. You could not mention the noun Palestinian in public when he ran. You could not mention them. You could not mention them by name. So for this Negro to run and not only call their name, stand up for them. Remember, Mandela was a terrorist as president. So you're going to vote, you're going to run on, no, free him. He's not a terrorist. He's a freedom fighter. And that's why I'm so happy I love your podcast because I see you in that tradition. You could be anywhere. You're talented enough to be anywhere, but you've made a choice to be of service to people. And I just had to say that to you. I know, we have about 6 or 7 more minutes here, but I had to say that to you because we need that now more than ever, Sabrina. Because people are being lied to and their stories are not being told. And we are dying. And people here are freezing to death in Chicago. They are. And when I mentioned, have you heard of the Tent Partnership for Refugees?
Mm-hmm.
No one wants to talk about it. I said, this is the corporate plan. It's colonialism 2.0. How can y'all not talk about it? The corporations, they're bringing the refugees in. They want Venezuela without Venezuelans so they can steal all their stuff. Well, Sabrina, how do we get this out here? What you help me. I'm out of breath now. I can't say anymore. I'm gonna sit back. I ain't saying nothing else. You got it.
I think we have to keep doing what we're doing. This is why I encourage people, you know, definitely pay attention to independent media because we are covering a lot of these things. I also encourage people to write more. This is something that I'm going to be doing coming the new year, is to get back into writing. I have a Substack and get back into that because a lot of people also are turning towards reading people's Substack articles instead of reading the New York Times.
I'm
Uh,
guilty.
I think
Yeah.
that's a big one that's happening as well. And I think that you have to organize, like start where you can first, start locally within your community. This is what we do. We do mutual aid. Those of us at RBN, we have different mutual aid chapters. So we have one in Orlando, one in Kansas City, and we have one where I am in Boston area. So we just did an event yesterday where we were giving away toys for kids that are from families that are in within need. We were giving away toys. We had like a catered lunch for them. We had games for the kids, etc. We've done the back to school event where we give out all the supplies that the kids need for school. Like you don't have to rewrite the rules because all you have to do is look at what was already done. One of the things I applaud the Black Panthers for was the mutual aid programs, them giving back to their own communities. So start with what has already been done, and then you can always add on from there. But I think sometimes people try to reinvent the wheel, and you really don't have to do all of that, especially this day and age with information and technology. So start locally where you can. If you want to get into politics, I encourage you to start locally, city council or for mayor. You're still going to run into some of the corruption and all of that too, but I think you have a better chance if you're running on those types of issues locally than you do running for president. And then also, people, please pay attention to who's running for Congress because they're the ones that are voting on the pieces of legislation. Oftentimes, the president is just a figurehead. The president is there, to answer to corporations and the military industrial complex. That's really what they're there for. So I think what you can do, definitely pay attention to who's running for Congress because they're the ones that are voting on these bills and writing some of these bills. But pay attention to local politics. Some progressive policies have passed, they've just passed locally, whether it was increasing the minimum wage, giving everybody paid sick leave. I think that just passed in Missouri, red state of all places. So these are the things I want people to pay attention to. And if you live in a state that's a ballot initiative state, run ballot measures, progressive ballot measures, and get them to pass in your area. We've passed a number in Massachusetts, but they've also passed in red states as well. Start locally first, please.
Well, I think we also have to tell the truth about how politics really works. Before my brother, I've had two brothers in Congress, which I don't know if that's ever happened in the Black community before. Someone told me, and it's been a privilege. But my brother, Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., as my mother said, he was a brilliant congressman, but he was a horrible politician. My mother, she said that publicly. I'm not spilling them. Yeah, she's a real one. She'll tell you just because that's what you got to do. And she said, because he's doing radio now. She said, tell people how this works. Tell people that if you are not a member of one of the two major parties, you can't get on a committee. That's how they have locked this thing up. Tell them how you walk down the hall, someone will press something in your hand, and it is a six-figure bill from the party. And if you don't pay them, you get kicked off. You'll never be a ranking member. And Jonathan was one of the. This is my brother who's in Congress now. He's one of the initial signatories to the ceasefire. Cory Bush came to him. He was like, "Oh yeah, bet I'm in." He can't get on business councils, and he's like, "Well, I'm taking a hit, but this is the hit you take." But we have to let people know how this works, so that we can push for the reforms that we need so that you can get the Green Party in, so that you can get all of these other parties in. I mean, this is not a democracy, it's an oligarchy. And the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party, they are private corporations. I was shocked when I found that out. I was like, wait a minute. And there's that. And if you are not, and the board of directors, it's the DNC. And we saw that it was so obvious during this, when they wiped out the 14 million votes, when canceled the primary, and no, and when you said something about it, I was attacked by a lot of Democrats who listen on terrestrial radio, which is where I am also. And it was amazing. I said, wait a minute, I'm not going to lie. This is, how are you going to campaign on democracy? And you're the most anti-democratic of all. And how are you missing the fact that this guy is winning working people? You know, I mean, moving into 2025, what do you foresee before we go? I mean, what are like the big stories? What do you think we're rolling into going into 2025, aside from Project 2025, which was started in 2022? It's already started, y'all. Under Biden, get mad.
I think a big part of it is going to be foreign policy. I encourage everyone, please pay attention to what's happening across the world, because we all know we can look and see what's happening to the Palestinian people, and we know this isn't right. We know this is wrong. But I want you to understand that would have continued if Kamala would have won as well. Like, both parties are backing, Israel and their destruction against the Palestinian people, regardless of what they tell you. The U.S. government is backing the destruction of the Palestinian people. And that's the way that I really have to say it to get that across to people. So there's that. Israel and Gaza, pay attention to Israel's expansion. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to what's happening with BRICS. Donald Trump has already said that he wants to implement tariffs on the BRICS countries if they decide to move away from the US dollar. You can't continue to sanction these countries for years and then tell them, but you still have to use our currency. So pay attention to that, because if those tariffs come into place, that is really going to impact us here economically. It will make things more expensive, despite what Donald Trump is telling you. So you have to know about that. So I think a lot of the things that we really need to focus on, the foreign policy issues and how they're going to affect us here at home, which again, I think still would have been an issue if Kamala would have won, because both parties are against what BRICS is doing. Both parties don't want BRICS to have their own currency, and both parties support and back Israel. So pay attention to that. A lot of people that are upset about the migrant situation in the U.S., pay attention to what's happening with the border, because as much as he says this, I don't really believe that Donald Trump is going to prevent. I mean, he's already been president before. I don't really believe that he's going to round up. He says, we're going to do this mass deportation. I don't really believe that's going to happen. I just don't. Militarily, like him trying to use the military and those types of things, I just don't see how that's going to fly. And I think people are still going to be upset about the migrant situation. So pay attention to that as well. And I think when you pay attention to these things, what you'll see is that marginalized people and those at the bottom, when it comes to class, those are the people that will continue to be looked over. The Occupy Wall Street movement, I think, in my sense, had the right idea when they said that it's the 99% of us against the top 1%. The problem that I think that we continue to run into is we need a larger movement around that 99%. But as long as the Democratic Party and the Republican Party can continue to divide that 99% over a couple of issues, we'll never build that strong, large movement. So we cannot continue to be fooled or misled by those two parties into believing that it's really about left versus right. It's really about top bottom. And you have to come to terms with that. The billionaires who control so much, not just in this country, but in the world, and exploit the working class people. That's really what it's about. These two political parties there serve as a distraction. They convince you that there is this big difference from left and right. And there's some differences with social issues, but for the most part, it's top bottom, and it's a uniparty, and it's a corporate party. And the sooner that you understand that, I think the sooner we could start some type of a mass movement in this country for that 99%.
How can we be in touch with you?
You can find me on YouTube. My channel is Sabby Sabs. You can also find me on Twitter. My handle is @SabbySabs2.
And the Revolutionary Blackout Network, how can we find them?
You can find RBN also on YouTube. The channel is Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can also find us on Twitter at Rev Black Network.
It was an honor to have you with me today and with this audience. You are, a great warrior, and I just thank God for you. And if there's anything that we can do to be supportive, you got it.
Thank you so much.
May God bless you. Sabby Sabs, everybody. Sabrina Salvati. There you go. And so, everybody, I am Santita Jackson. It's AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. A blessing to be with you. Back in just a few.